Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Josh Fitzer.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Brian E. Roach. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors, MyBookie.ag, as well as our partner, TSE Total Sports Enterprises. Today's episode deals with, I guess you'd call it a game, that the Steelers played in Chicago. Definitely a underwhelming performance in almost every aspect of the game. And to help me out with this, we have another member of the Steel City Underground family. Josh Fitzer will be joining us. Josh, how you doing today?
As well as I can be. How are you, Brian?
I'm a little hot, man.
Yeah.
I am a little bit hot. I am not exactly sure what went on in that game, but a comedy of errors, a tragedy of errors. I don't know where to begin with what a mess that was.
Yeah, it was pretty pathetic. It seems all around, all three phases: defense, offense, and special teams. So it just kind of, I don't know why the Steelers always have to do this every year. There's always one or two games like this where they play an awful team and then they play like that awful team and then let the other team win. So I don't know why they do it. It's every year.
I've talked about this on previous podcasts, and I still think this is true. The fact that the starters do not play hardly at all, especially so much in this preseason, makes the first four games, in my opinion, an extension of the preseason, and they still are working out the kinks. And in the process of that, they do tend to always throw in a real stinker. And in some ways this was that, and in some ways it wasn't. Statistically, Le'Veon really didn't get on track. I think 15 carries for 61 yards with a long of 13. But I'm going to tell you, in my mind, I don't think it's all Le'Veon's fault. The offensive line, admittedly missing two starters today, B.J. Finney playing, as well as Chris Hubbard. Gilbert and Foster were both out. Foster left early in the game. But, minus those two starters, even though Hubbard and Finney performed well last year, the offensive line has not looked good.
Yeah, I would agree. I also think, not to fully disagree with you, but I also think some of it's on Bell. I think the first two games, I think, again, it goes back to him holding out. I wasn't against him holding out. I wasn't against him wanting more money. But not being with the team the whole year and not playing any preseason snaps at all. I know he was in football shape, but that really doesn't translate into actual games. So I think him holding out, it kind of hurt himself. Again, I'm not mad at him for holding out. I never turned on him by any means, but I think that's been part of it too.
Well, clearly he was rusty early on, and it's not just the combination of the offensive line out of sync. It's him being in sync with the offensive line. There were a couple of flashes where it looked good. As usual, the theme seems to be anytime Le'Veon gets a run in of over 10 yards, there's a flag. That occurred at least once in this game again. The offensive line just still feels like they just need to mesh. I just don't quite get, they definitely appear to be underperforming. But again, to be fair, the Bears front seven's a good front seven. Let's not take anything away from them. Their front is an aggressive, solid front. They don't have a lot of notoriety, but it's a good defense. The Vikings, a very good front. The Browns have a better front than they used to. So it's not, to be honest, the first four defenses the Steelers are going to play are not easy. They're not pushover defenses. And for fans to think we're going to come in and just waltz over these guys is a little unrealistic.
Yeah, and then especially, who are we playing? The Jaguars next week?
The Ravens.
Oh, the Ravens. Okay, yeah. So then the Ravens, I don't know if Brandon Williams is going to play. He didn't play today, but again, Brandon Williams, Suggs, C.J. Mosley, and the Ravens can always get kind of no-name guys in there too that can play really well. So, and their secondary is pretty good. We'll see. It's just frustrating. I'm not saying, obviously, that we were going to come and run over the Bears, but also the statistics going into this game we're 1-12 at Soldier Field or something like that. And It's just, I don't know. I know it's the first few games of the season. It's just frustrating. I also work with the Bears fans, so now I got to hear about it all week.
Yeah, I know that. I know that feeling. Whenever they play the Giants, I have the same problem. Luckily, I didn't have that this week, and the Giants fans will all be quiet because they let the Eagles come back and beat them after at the end of the game. But let's take a breakdown of the game. So, we have the special teams has actually been a great surprise so far this year until today. We had the blocked punt for a touchdown in the Browns game. We had Tyler Matakevich making a great play on, the fake punt in the Vikings game, and everything had been consistent. Today, the wheels kind of fell off special teams. We had a blocked kick. We have Eli Rogers fumbling, muffing, and he just whiffed on that punt to give the Bears an extended drive and, deep into territory that results in 7 points. They didn't look good either. You want to try and find a area to say, yeah, we look pretty good there, and it's a struggle today.
Yeah, especially on the road. I think that Eli Rogers shouldn't have been back there. I understand Tomlin and company want to have AB only on offense and maybe to prevent injury. I don't know what the reason is, but AB should have been back there, especially on the road. I know Soldier Field can get pretty loud too, obviously. So I just, an experienced person back there on punt returns, it should have been AB back there, especially on the road. And again, I understand that they want to give other people opportunities and they want to keep AB only on offense. But I just think in this situation, Brown should have been back there.
We've got that. The defense had its ups and downs. They had moments where they didn't look bad. Look, they held Glennon to 101 yards passing with 1 TD and 1 interception, 15 of 22. His rating was 76.2 or 74.2. I don't think a Bears wide receiver caught a pass the entire game. So it's, from the pass defense side of things, it wasn't terrible. Where it seemed to break down clearly, especially in the second half, was the run game. Now Howard, their back who really gashed us for like 138 yards over the game. He was the second leading rusher in the NFL last year, so it shouldn't really be a surprise that he's a good runner. What is a surprise is this was a patchwork offensive line. Yes, they got Kyle Long back, who is probably their best player on that line, but they were, their center at one point had a cast on his hand. He moved, he got out. They shifted around. They were missing their other starting guard, and yet they held up better than I would have ever thought against a defense that really looked like the front was putting up a lot of pressure over the first few games. They had pressure, but it felt very undisciplined today.
Yeah, I would agree, especially with all the missed tackles, and that's I think was the most frustrating part, is especially with Shazier, who was such a sure tackler last year, and I think sometimes he doesn't know his own speed. And we all talk about Shazier's speed. We've been talking about it for years and everything. And so there was like a few times in the Browns game where he just overshot players. So I'm not sure if he fully knows his own speed, or, the old adage, you don't know your own strength. But tackling needs to be cleaned up. That's like number one. And so, yeah, I just hate when we just get gashed for those long runs like that and we just get thrown off sync. It's just really frustrating.
Yeah, so the rush defense definitely wasn't there. Pass defense, not so bad. I guess the one thing I can pull out is and I guess we blame it more on the Bears than we do on a great play by us. But Vance McDonald on the blocked kick, running down as I guess it was Cooper, I think, who was taking that back, decided, I'm so far ahead of everybody, I can just waltz in. And they end up, Vance McDonald knocks the ball loose. Chaos ensues. The refs clearly show that they don't know what the heck they're doing. Call the play one way, reverse that call, then think about it again, call New York, ask what we should do, cry home to their mommies to wipe their nose. I don't know what they were doing. But they finally get what I think is the correct call, because it wasn't going to be a safety, because the Steelers never had possession. Right. Jordan Berry pops the ball out, bats it illegally out of the end zone. And as a result, since he lost the ball at the 1 yard line, the Bears got it at the half-yard line and then proceeded to blow it on their own by going and having a false start so that they had to just kick a field goal. So, the fact that the Steelers were in the game at the end of the game in some ways is surprising because they certainly gave up enough to the Bears to let them hang around in the game, and really it could have been a much worse defeat than it was. Not that anything is, you can't take a moral victory out of this, but it definitely could have been worse.
Yeah, I would agree. Somebody had mentioned earlier in the year, and I know it's still very early on in the year, that, and it's going to be at home, and we have Rodgers and Brady coming into Heinz Field. And so, again, that's a couple weeks, many weeks away, but we just need to kind of not obviously only prepare for those games, but again, it could have been a lot worse if the Bears had any more impact players on their team. And hats off to Vance McDonald for not quitting on the play.
Absolutely.
And Jordan Berry for not quitting on the play. Some players would have.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and again, we did lose the game, but it would have been the margin would have been a lot larger.
Yeah, it's the other part of this, and we were talking about it a little bit before we went and started recording, is the refereeing. I want to start with one of the long passes to Martavis Bryant, where Martavis looks like he's wide open. The Bear defender leaps up, begins to tackle Martavis, and I posted a picture of this on Twitter well before the ball is even close to him. That's called contact before the ball arrives. And I'm pretty sure that's known as pass interference. And, in many cases, I felt like, okay, the refs are somewhat being ticky-tack, but at the same time, they just were being beyond letting them play. There were clear calls that should have been made all over the field. On the last two runs that really cost the Steelers the game, there are blatant holding calls right in front of refs who are not making the play. Artie Burns was in the grasp of whatever that wide receiver was, had one arm locked, the guy had a handful of jersey, the ref's looking right at it, and he goes, yeah, that's good. I'm okay with that. I'm stymied. And I was joking with you, last year the refs in my mind were so bad, and now I'm back to going, the refs stink. They just flat out stink. The refs were so bad last year that I felt like every time I wrote a good, bad, and ugly column after the game, the refs were sitting in the ugly side of it because the calls were so atrocious. The consistency was so bad. And I've been kind to them to a certain extent this year, and I haven't really called them out. Well, guess what? Refs, you stink. You stink. You're back in the ugly column. I guarantee you will be reading about yourselves. Probably they won't. But, and somebody will be reading about how ugly this game was reffed.
Yeah, it was, especially on the two major. I was able to watch, again, the last couple of minutes of the game, and the run that was called back in overtime. You could just see Hayden was just thrown right to the ground. And I was, that it was just everyone on Twitter was like, "Yep, that was holding, that was holding, that was holding." And then on the final run that won them the game, it was, I believe it was Artie Burns. Artie Burns, like you were saying, was just held to no end. And there's refs like right over there. It's not like the ref is like 20 yards down the field. Like the ref is getting like a front row seat to this penalty, and they're not calling it. And these are huge problems. And I understand that refs miss calls, but again, it's just league-wide, it's not consistent. And, it's becoming more and more of a problem. And that's, I guess, my biggest gripe is if you're going to throw the flag. And then, like, I've seen pass interference calls called for much less than that, for basically nothing. So it's just amazing that, Martavis Bryant is tackled before the ball even gets there and there's no call. So it doesn't make sense to me either.
Josh, nobody would probably want to bet on me getting through an entire season without complaining about the refs, and rightly so, because that's a sucker bet. There's no way it would happen. I was hopeful, but hey, they stink. And there you go. If you were betting against me saying that, you just lost. Now, speaking of betting, You see what I did there? The thing is, it's oftentimes more important where you place your bets than it is even who you place your bets on. You want somebody who's trustworthy. You want somebody who's dependable. You want somebody who's got a good reputation. And when we're asked about that here at Steel City Underground, we always tell everyone, try mybookie.ag. They've been around for years. They flat out have a rock-solid reputation. They've got a great platform that makes it easy for you to get on, make your bets. And as a special bonus, that's right, a special bonus, if you go on to mybookie.ag, put in the promo code SteelCity, you can get up to 100% bonus for your first deposit. So if you deposit $100, you might get as much as $200 entered into your account. You deposit $300, you might get as much as $600 into your account. It's like making money for doing nothing at all. So, run over to mybookie.ag, jump online, use the Steel City code, and place some bets. Another great thing about mybookie.ag is their turnaround time. You make your bet, you win, and in 2 days you get paid. So visit mybookie.ag. Make your bet, win, and get paid. It's just that simple. To get back to the way this game played out, if you want to look at it, what do you think the Steelers can take away from this game and come back and say, okay, we can work on that, or that wasn't so bad? Because, I'm sort of asking you to help me write my good, bad, and ugly, because I got nothing good.
I would probably say that, luckily they're not, 0-3 or 1-2 right now. And then also the fact that the Ravens lost today. But I also think, again, they've been in these situations before, as frustrating and as difficult as this game is to swallow. Like, they've been in this situation before. We all know that. And then they've gone on to win 5 or 6 games in a row and our defense be really stingy and stuff like that. So I know that Tomlin is going to figure this out and straighten it out, especially with the defense. Me being more of a defensive guy, I think that he'll get everybody going and maybe calm Ben down a little bit. Again, we haven't talked about Ben yet, but Ben just kind of continues his ways of not being too good on the road. So I think it's going to get cleaned up all around. I think that I'm not hitting the panic button yet. It's only the 3rd week. And we all know what our defense is capable of. And just hats off to J.J. Wilcox, too, coming in and making that play as well.
True.
And stepping in for Sean Davis. And so that was a great trade and a great move by the Steelers. So I think that we'll get everything figured out. I think that I'm not hitting the panic button yet. I think that those are some positives to take away from it. And that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Now, I want to address the Ben doesn't play well on the road thing. Clearly, he doesn't play as well on the road as at home, but that's not unique to Ben. Most quarterbacks play better at home because most teams play better at home. But I want to look at this game in particular because I know that narrative is going to come up all week long. Oh, Ben on the road, blah, blah, blah.
Right,
but
right.
He hits Martavis in the hands with a deep ball that Martavis drops.
Right.
Haley and he fall in love with the deep ball yet again this week and continually keep throwing it and trying to push it down the field. I sort of get it, and I will say again, maybe they weren't quite as in love with it this week as they were last week, but those are low percentage passes that are going to contribute to his pass percentage being off, and that's going to affect his quarterback rating. Now, that being said, Ben was 22 for 39, so he's got 17 incomplete passes, 56.4 percentage, 235 yards, a TD, no turnovers as far as interceptions. He did have the one strip fumble, and a quarterback rating of 82.7. That's not awful. It certainly isn't a quarterback rating over 100. But I sometimes think that the simple way the Steelers play, especially this year where they just seem to be desperately trying to get that deep passing game going, that's going to impact Ben negatively as far as overall stats and his performance. And when people go back and review it, they're going to go, oh, he had a bad game. I actually don't think he had that bad a game. He was way off early in the game. The ball was soaring on him. He was high with a lot of passes. and he settled in. And once they got moving a little bit, it felt a little better. But it's the self-inflicted wounds that continue to haunt them. False start penalties, illegal procedure penalties, illegal formation penalties, holding penalties, that just put them behind the eight ball and make this offense sputter.
Right, yeah. And I wasn't sure of Ben's final numbers. Obviously, according to his numbers, he didn't play as bad as everyone is making him out to be. And again, I think we'll hear that narrative all week. We're going to hear the Fire Haley narrative all week, which is it's comical to me at this point. Anytime I tweet out that hashtag, I'm being a total sarcastic jerk because it's comical at this point to anyone who takes that seriously. But I don't know what the deal is with a lot of deep pass plays. I know the past couple of years we obviously have had a lot, but I feel like it's being more forced than it's been in the past. And evidence of that was just the Vikings game last week. I felt like, luckily, the Vikings defense obviously was good, but we obviously came out of that game with a win, luckily, because I thought there was a lot of underneath stuff that Ben could have hit, but he kept trying to force it. So, yeah, I don't know what this I don't want to say new, but this kind of newish way of with Haley and Ben wanting to, I guess, force it or have more, push it down the field quicker.
Yeah, when you look at what we had, okay, AB was targeted 14 times and caught the ball 10 times. He had 110 yards with a long of 23. Okay, so that's a typical AB type game. It's right in the middle of where he tends to end up. Juju Smith-Schuster caught two passes off of 6 targets, had 39 yards with a big long 25er. Bell was 7 of 6, 37 yards. Martavis 8 targets, 2 catches. A long of 17, total of 30 yards. And Jesse James had 4 targets and 2 catches. So Vance McDonald, 0 targets. Eli Rogers apparently stayed home, other than to fumble a punt, because he's not in here anywhere. They didn't even look at him in the passing game. No targets at all. And I think that is, well, I understand they need to move the ball around. They have so many playmakers. They're all over the place. Ben, to me, is at his best when that receiving list is like 7, 8, 9 guys. When he's going down his progressions, he's finding the mismatch, he's finding the open receiver, he's not forcing the ball down the field. And that's where he needs to get back to, patiently moving through. Now, I will say, it's more difficult to move through his progressions when he is under duress. And, he definitely was under duress during this game. He was sacked 3 times, which is the high so far this year. And as I said, the offensive line missing a couple guys, a couple starters. I'm sure that the Wizards at Pro Football Focus will come back and tell us we're all wrong and they were great. I don't care if they weren't. They really were not great. They've performed much better, and they need to get better. And I think that's probably all we can continue to say is, it's still early in the season. The Ravens certainly looked worse than the Steelers did today, losing 44-7. That was I was taking quite a lot of joy in that, I will admit.
You and I both.
Yep. And the Browns figured out how to lose to a truly bad team in the Colts. And we'll see what happens in the Bengals and the Green Bay game. But, the worst that the Steelers are going to be is tied for the division lead at this point. 3-1, and they have to travel to Baltimore next week. I will be perfectly content to have this loss on their record, provided we win next week.
You and I both. I really got, I don't know if you saw my video on Twitter, but I really enjoyed seeing the Ravens lose the way that they did, especially with Joe Flacco being benched. I don't know if that's ever happened in his NFL career yet. I could be wrong, but Flacco being benched and the Ravens losing the way that they did was very, very sweet. And I know we lost today too, but we certainly played better than they did.
Yeah.
So, and again, out. I mean, I agree with you. I'd rather have this loss and then going to Baltimore next week and win there. Certainly. So.
Yeah, Flacco was 8 of 18 for 44.4% pass percentage, 28 yards, and a passer rating of 12.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yes, as I tweeted out at halftime when he had I think 4 catches or 4 completions out of 8 throws for 2 yards or something ridiculous like that. I said, yeah, he's elite.
Exactly, elite. Yeah.
Now I don't want to pick on the Ravens because we have to deal with them next week. But any other thoughts you have for the end of this game? Anything else that you think we missed, that stood out, that aggravated you? Anything else?
Just going back to, I don't know why the Steelers have to play down to teams like this. I don't know why especially on the road, I don't know why we can't just go in and with the playmakers we have. And I know there was players missing on offense and everything and stuff like that, but I just don't know why we got to kind of come in and just kind of not stand around literally, but just kind of keep them in the game and kind of stand around and let them come back and win. Just like on one drive when it was 17-14, I was like, okay, let's score a touchdown here. And then we end up settling for a field goal. I'm like, of course we do that. With all the playmakers we have, I don't know why we can't just blow them out and just get it out of the way early. But it is what it is. It happens. But that's the most frustrating thing for me.
I think it's very clear with this particular instance, the Steelers are not currently able to run the ball consistently, and that impacts them dramatically. They become one-dimensional. They don't have when you take that aspect of their game away. It limits Le'Veon's touches. Limiting Le'Veon's touches means he is not as involved in the game, and that puts them behind the sticks a lot because they end up trying to throw on first down and second down because they can't run the ball. And I think you gotta give some credit to the guys on the other side of the line. The Bears' defensive line is good. They are a quality unit. The secondary had been their issue, and at one point I tweeted out during the game, you have to give credit to the Bears secondary. They were covering the Steelers receivers, maybe a little too heavily at times, and the refs were letting them get away with it. But they for the most part they did a good job keeping, especially Martavis Bryant, obviously Eli Rogers, who nobody knows where he was, and even Juju in check, and the tight ends, which had been the big bugaboo for these guys for the first 2 games, didn't hurt them at all. So they adjusted, they did what they had to do, and they played better. And they, like we said, they get paid to play too. It's not like they're just schlubs. It's tough to go into another team's house and dominate them. You'd like to think the Steelers can do it, but I still maintain this early in the season they are just not a fully evolved team yet.
I would agree.
All right, Josh. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Tell everybody how they can find you, follow you on all of the various social media things in the world.
I'm mostly on Twitter. You can follow me at TerribleJosh6, the number 6. And we're obviously putting out a lot of awesome stuff at Steel City Underground. Stay posted for that and all that good stuff. And go Steelers.
Absolutely. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. Until we talk next time, everybody be good, be safe, and we will talk to you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.